can't know where Crystal is. And then, you know who this is? No. How comfortable you? Okay.
Congressional Candidate Forum.
Nicely done. So you came up with that.
Are we getting the sound straight from the camera?
No special sound. It should be
Clearly, I need to whip out a silver mat.
Welcome, everybody. We're going to start with some housekeeping rules because we're doing a radio program. We don't want to tell people where the restroom is on the air. So we're going to start with a few announcements. I'm Sharon Maeda, KVRU 105.7 FM's station manager, and thank you all for coming. If you forgot to bring non-perishable food for the Rainier Valley Food Bank, there are these little slips of paper on the table when you leave out in the lobby, and I hope you'll take these and consider making a gift to them. We have 2 mics on the floor, as you can see, and at different points within the evening, we will have, your moderator will let you know when to line up if you have questions that you would like to ask of either or both candidates. If you don't want to ask them on mic, we have slips of paper that are going around, and you can send them to the aisle, and we'll pick them up and get them up to the moderator. The restroom, there's one restroom right back here, but because of a noise factor, this is an old historic building, so if you are able, we ask that you use the restrooms down the stairs over on this side. There are 2 restrooms down there. Literature is on the back table, not only for candidates Adam Smith and Sarah Smith, but also for some of the initiatives and other things. And these should not be considered an endorsement by either the Columbia City Business Association or KVRU. We are both nonprofit organizations that cannot endorse. But you can support CCBA or KVRU by picking up information on the table out in the lobby when you leave. There will be no intermission, but if you have to leave at any point, please try to be as quiet as you can. On behalf of the Columbia City Business Association and KVRU 105.7 FM, welcome to our 2nd annual Candidate Forum, featuring the most interesting and perhaps the most consequential race to the voters of Southeast Seattle. If ever there was a time when Congress matters, it's now. We would like to thank our sister seed arts program, the Rainier Arts Center, for making this historic auditorium available to us. And a shout out to our sister community media, the South Seattle Emerald, for live Facebooking this event. And we welcome other media, and especially NHK, Japanese Broadcasting Corporation, and their New York anchor, Kenji Kono. And KVRU will be tweeting at KVRU 105.7 FM. Follow us on hashtag SmithSmithForum. Our moderator this evening is the host of KVRU's weekly public affairs program, The 5th Estate. Crystal Fincher has been involved in civic issues, working for former Mayor Mike McGinn, serving on boards and commissions, and owning Fincher Consulting, a political consulting firm. She eats and sleeps local issues and how they impact our community. She is on the air every Friday evening at 5 p.m., bringing you newsmakers and community advocates to discuss the issues that matter. And just to ensure that there's no mic grab tonight, we have given both candidates their own microphone. Some of you may recall last year.
We've always shared quite well.
You're pretty good at it so far. No one's withheld it.
All right, so without further ado, Crystal, take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Sharon. I want to thank you and Maurice Jones Jr. for being instrumental on the KVRU side in putting this together. And I want to thank the candidates for joining us. Thank you very much, and bringing your perspectives to the people, very important. So just a couple of ground rules. We're going to have a mixture of questions from me, the moderator, and from the audience, and I'll key you at those times where you can line up at the 2 mics on the front of either aisle. Candidates will have 1 minute to answer each question and a 30-second rebuttal to their opponent's answers. So with that said, each candidate will have 3 minutes to give an opening statement, and we'll have 3 minutes at the conclusion for a closing statement. And so we're gonna start with Adam Smith and his opening.
Well, thank you very much, and I want to thank KVRU not just for hosting this debate, but for being such an important voice in the Rainier Valley and beyond. Local radio, I think, is crucial to getting messages out and to giving people a place to hear the stories about their community. I think you do an outstanding job of that. Well, I am Adam Smith, and I'm running for re-election to Congress. I believe that I have been a strong, effective, progressive voice for the people of the 9th District. And part of it is my background. I grew up in a blue-collar family in the city of SeaTac. My father was a baggage handler at United Airlines. I know what it's like to grow up in a working-class family. So equality of opportunity has always been critically important to me, and I think this is the #1 issue facing our country right now. Income inequality, a lessening of opportunity. And I have led on the crucial issues that are trying to combat that. Most notably, supporting the minimum wage in the city of SeaTac, the city I grew up in. It was very important to have me endorse that issue as a son of SeaTac and a member of Congress at the time. And it was the first in the nation $15 minimum wage. That's but a small step, but a step in the right direction. I used to represent a district that was far more 50-50 before 2012, but even then, I supported the cap and trade bill to get after climate change aggressively, to take on big oil. I continue to support a carbon tax. I support 1631, despite all of their efforts to barrage us with television ads to tell us not to support it, because I know how important it is to invest in green energy and move forward. I supported the health care bill that expanded health care to 25 to 30 million people. Let me tell you, I had town hall meetings with as many as 2,000 people there, most of whom were telling me not to. But supporting people and having access to health care meant something to me, and this is the most important point. It meant something to me because I understand my district, and I grew up in that situation. My mother passed away without health insurance, and this is a story that thousands of people in my district can tell. I know how important it is to provide adequate health care to people, and I'm absolutely committed to doing it. The Affordable Care Act was but the first step. We need universal access to health care. I am a co-sponsor of Medicare for All and a founding member of the Medicare for All caucus. But more than anything, I am progressive, but I also have a strong record of fighting for those progressive values on immigration, on combating the detention facility down in the Port of Tacoma and taking them on from the very start. I have the experience, the tenacity, and the understanding of the district to continue to be a very effective member for this district, to fight back against Donald Trump's agenda, to advance a progressive agenda, bring people together so that we can form a governing progressive coalition. I think I'm a very effective member of Congress, and I would ask for your vote in the election this November. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Smith?
My name is Sarah Smith, and Adam talks about his equality of opportunity, the opportunities he had as a kid, and so I wanted to give you a little bit of my story so you know what it was like growing up. When I was in high school, I was busy having sit-ins and walkouts in high school for a war that George Bush lied about and Adam voted to send us to. When I graduated from high school, my friends had a choice. They could either go to college and become die in that war. I buried friends before I was 20 in it. When I graduated from debt that I'm still paying $1,000 a month today, I graduated into the worst recession that any living generation has seen. And when it came time for us to decide to bail out the banks for the people, Adam voted in favor of bailing out the banks, not the people that were suffering because of their misuse of our money. I grew up in a post-recession America, and everybody else that grew up in that post-recession America is part of that post-recession generation. But we are a generation of fighters. We are a generation of people that do a lot more with a lot less. We're a generation of people that understand that incrementalism doesn't work. It hasn't changed things for the better for us for 22 years. They've only gotten worse. Income inequality has gotten worse. Student debt has gotten worse. Our infrastructure has gotten worse. We can't participate in the economy that we're building on our backs. We need to take action now. Bold vision matters now more than ever. We need to take strong stances on the things that matter to us. We can't keep compromising on the things that are important, on our values, on what matters. We have to choose to create this bold, unapologetic future where we fight to put working people before our donors. The grip of corporate money has forced us into this position over and over again, and we've been pushed out farther and farther from our congressional table. I'm the only candidate that's running without corporate money, that's running without PAC money and without deep-pocketed donors, because that's who I want to serve. I want to serve the people. I don't want to serve those big money organizations. I want to serve everyone sitting in this room, everyone in the boundaries of the 9th District, and I put my money where my mouth is to prove it. I'm running for your vote today, and it's my goal to earn it. So I hope today I'm able to earn your vote in this district. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So our first question goes to Representative Smith. This district, as it's currently composed, is different than the district that you signed up originally to represent. It's now a majority-minority district. The boundaries have shifted somewhat. So the question is, how has your approach changed, if it's changed, to representing the district as it is today, and what have you learned in the change?
Well, it is worth pointing out that this district's been around since 2012, and I've been elected to represent this specific district with over 70% of the vote 3 times. So the people of the district have had the opportunity to judge whether or not I'm representing them, and have overwhelmingly said, yes, I have. And really, I grew up in South King County. That's the politics that I worked in. The way my district changed is I lost Pierce and Thurston and got much more of Seattle and much more of King County. But those are the issues I've been working on my whole life. Look, no matter how your district changes, there's going to be different constituencies. And you have to grow in your understanding of those constituencies. I would say the biggest thing that I've done is something that I was doing before. I reach out to communities of color and have overwhelming support from Pramila Jayapal, from Rebecca Saldana, from El Central de la Raza, because these groups have seen that I have reached out to them, because their voice needs to be heard. We need a representative who knows how to listen to people who aren't like him or her. We speak 160 different languages in this district. You're not going to elect somebody who's exactly like you. You need to elect somebody who's going to listen to you and represent you, and I've done that.
And a similar question to you. This is a district that you don't quite live in the boundaries of, but somewhat adjacent. How does that affect how you're able to serve this district, and what made you want to and feel that you're able to represent the people in this district?
So I actually think it helps me understand the problems people face in this district. I live about 2,600 feet from the border, but I live 2,600 feet from the border because when I lived in South Seattle, my roommates left and I couldn't afford to stay in my house, and then my landlady decided to sell. So I actually faced the same exact housing problems that most of the people in this district have faced. When I was trying to find a new place to live, I couldn't afford the rent in most of the places I was in. So I bought a house specifically as close as I could to the boundary of the 9th District. And it is weird when you're shopping for a house in the boundary of a congressional district, believe me. But that's what I did. I tried my hardest to stay as close as I could. And to be frank, I mean, you know, Representative Jayapal actually lived in the 9th District when she ran in the 7th, and it didn't affect her ability to serve the 7th at all. She's become one of the strongest voices in Congress we have for progressive values, and that's what I want to do for this district. If given the opportunity, of course I want to move back in as well. I used to love where I lived. I loved my neighbors. I got along very well with them. We were very good friends. But that's what I want to do. I work in this district. My friends live in this district. All the people that are on my campaign live in this district. I think it helps me understand it.
And Congressman Smith, you have 30 seconds available as rebuttal time to that round of questions.
No, that's really sort of her background. I don't have a rebuttal for that.
It's a hard one.
And you have 30 seconds available. Let's feel better at.
Yeah, not really much more to say. I mean, that's my background. We're facing gentrification and displacement at an alarming rate in this district. And it's hard to understand it. It's hard to really get it unless you've lived through it. And that's why I keep talking about how lived experience matters. It affects the lens that you look through legislation on. It affects what you prioritize. It affects what you put forward when you're in Congress. And I think it's an important experience to have.
Now, we've heard a lot about civility in politics, and some talking about returning civility to the halls of Congress. Do you think that a lack of civility is a problem currently?
I think a lack of the ability to engage in public discourse exists. But when you're looking at people who are angry, you can't just say, stop being angry. You have to look at, why are these people angry? What is making them angry? What is their pain point? What's causing them to rise up like this and be so furious? And most of the time, it's hard to blame people for being angry that they don't have health care, that they're losing their homes, that they can't send their kids to school, that they're struggling with infrastructure that's incomplete or falling apart. It's hard to blame people for being mad about that. But what we have to do is we have to focus on educating people. So that's really what the job of a congressperson is to focus on educating people as much as you can and empowering them through legislation to move past those pain points so they no longer feel that anger anymore. And as far as within Congress itself, it does happen. There are, you know, more than one documented case of ugly fights happening in the halls of Congress among different congresspeople. That's something that we have to move away from. We have to be willing to engage politely.
Just for the record.
Just on same question to you.
I think a lack of civility is a big problem. And frankly, I think that's one of my great strengths as a member of Congress. I am incredibly passionate on a wide range of issues. I had a rally today on the gun control initiative, which I support, and my friend Gabby Giffords was there. As you all know, was shot in a random act of gun violence in 2011. I'm very passionate about that. As I mentioned, my mother in healthcare, I'm very passionate about that. But one of the things that I've always been is also civil, even the people who disagree with me. In fact, a young man came up to me who was supporting Sarah's campaign and had a couple of questions for me and said, you know, I don't agree with you, but at least, you know, you've been nice to Sarah, you've been cordial in the debate. I think that does matter, and I do think it is a problem, both right and left. If you let that anger over a situation get you into a point where you're shouting down people, because here's something that I also keep in mind, I need to listen. I might be wrong, okay? We all might be wrong. That person who we're angry at, that situation that we're angry at, we might learn something from listening instead of shouting.
Rebuttal time, Jennifer?
Sure, I mean, it's not really so much a rebuttal. I have a wide range of friends. I've managed to hold on to friends with completely different political ideologies than I do. And it's always been important to me to engage them in conversation. Every time I reach out to people and they have a differing opinion than me, I always ask them the same question: why? And then we just start talking. And I mean, I do agree with the congressman. You have to be willing to be wrong. You have to be willing to find common ground with people where you can. But the things that you can't compromise on are things like people's health care. You can't compromise on children's safety, on women's rights, on equality. Sometimes you have to draw a line.
Additional time for you? Congressman Smith?
I'm sorry.
Any additional time you want to take advantage of?
I just to emphasize the point that I think you do have to work together with different groups of people, but also, you know, draw a line. And I think the thing that I would say is, you can absolutely say, I'm not going to back down on healthcare for all. I'm not going to back down on making sure that everybody has health care that's not tied to their job, that is a matter of a right when you are in this country, period. But I think you can be more effective in doing that if you're not shouting down those who disagree with you, if you're engaging them and trying to pull them over to your side. And I think that's something that I've been very, very good at throughout my career.
Now that brings us to the next question. We're in the minority district. We're in a 9th congressional district. We've elected 2 Democrats to run against each other in the general election. This isn't quite your run-of-the-mill congressional district. Being that we do have an opportunity where we don't have to hear debate Republican versus Democrat, Democrat versus Democrat, do you feel that there's an extra responsibility on a Democrat in the situation of the person who's elected in this seat to be a national leader on progressive issues? Or do you think it's enough to stick with the district and what's going on here? Congressman Smith?
Okay. So 2 things. one, yes, you absolutely have to be a national leader, and I have been a national leader on the minimum wage, on climate change, on healthcare, on a wide range of issues. But I'll also tell you, the 9th district, whether it's left, right, whatever the percent, they deserve to be represented. They deserve to have a member of Congress who is connected to them and is not running on just a national agenda. Because a lot of the problems we face in this district are local. They're community problems. Right here in Southeast Seattle, transit-oriented development. Once Sound Transit went through, they've done a terrible job of building affordable housing and working on those issues. We need a member who's committed to this district and understands this district and who's going to work for it. And I have the best constituent service because I care about what the individual members of the district care about. So I don't think it would be effective if you had a member of Congress who spent all their time out of state campaigning for other candidates. This district does deserve a progressive leader on national issues. They also deserve someone who's going to fight for them to make sure that their Social Security check comes, that they aren't unfairly taxed on issue after issue. So this district deserves someone who's going to represent them specifically, not just nationally.
I believe that the problems we face here are national issues. And this national seat should be used to fight as much as possible for those issues. Because we're bringing the values of the 9th District, of what we know, of what we believe and what we feel, we're bringing that to a national scale to fight for people. I mean, I believe that the people in SeaTac deserve a $15 livable wage tied to inflation just as much as I believe the people in Kent do, the people in Federal Way, and the people in Mississippi. I mean, there's people in Kansas who are suffering under crumbling infrastructure, and 25 miles away from here, we had a bridge collapse not that long ago. Our problems are the same. And it's important to use the national seat to fight from a national lens and a national perspective, while also maintaining a cognizance of how that affects your district, and how those pieces of a national platform play into your district, how your district adapts to those national issues. It's important to recognize that what happens on a broad scale also happens on a small scale, but the seat is intended to fight for a broad scale.
Well, I think that I disagree a little bit with that. The problems of this district are not the same as every place else. Some of them are, but for instance, the Highline School District was in a very complicated situation. The FAA promised them $14 million to build up their schools against the noise. They went back on it. It took my leadership to get that language fixed in the National Defense Authorizing Act to get that passed. We have Somali grocery stores here in this district that were denied access to the food stamp programs for the wrong reasons. So it took my leadership to bring them together with the Department of Agriculture. 30 seconds is anyway. So I think we have problems here that are unique, that deserve to have someone who understands those issues.
I think that they can be issues that affect people in the district that also affect people on a national scale. I mean, I think that the schools that are around LAX, the schools that are around Chicago O'Hare also have similar problems and face similar fights. And I also think that grocery stores nationwide and small businesses nationwide are also facing similar problems. But that's why the seat works within a local capacity, but also functions at a national level, is because those issues do exist outside of the district as well, and it's important to recognize that when we're fighting for them in our own district.
Congressman Smith, what issues do you feel like are unique to our local district here?
Well, I think the biggest one that's unique is the diversity of our district and understanding all of the different communities of color and what their concerns are. I mean, to give you another example, and look, if LAX has a problem with their airport, I'm going to be honest, I'm not flying down to LAX to fight for them to make sure they get it fixed. I hope that their congressman will. I'm going to fight for my district because that's my job. They've got a member of Congress, they've got 2 senators, they can fight for it. One of the big diversity issues in our area is, we have so many different communities of color. So I think one of the unique things is how do we make sure that it's inclusive? Gosh, 1 minute is just brutal. I'm sorry. I grew up in South King County when it was 95% white. It's now incredibly diverse. We need to get those diverse people into positions of leadership. I understand that. So I work with Satwinder Corps in Kent, with Jesse Johnson in Federal Way, with Vandana Slaughter in Bellevue, with a whole bunch of communities of color, with Zach Udon in Tukwila, to bring them in. My lifelong understanding of this district gets me connected to those people, to bring them in and make sure that our community represents what it looks like.
With counties, making sure that everybody has the representation that truly reflects them, and then also making sure that we take the values that we have here to a national scale, making sure that we take the things that are important to us to a national scale, the fights that we know are the big fights, go to big federal Congress. That's what we're here to do, is to fight those big fights for those people, so we can work with people on the state and local level to ensure we're fighting the unique fights we have at home.
Additional time?
No, just quickly, I think an understanding of the district is crucially important, and I really do disagree on this point. I don't want the people in 9th District to have a national figure, all right? I don't want to be a national figure, all right? I'll lead on those issues, but I want to fight for this district, and I think that's a big difference between our 2 campaigns. Sarah has a great platform. In our community, she hasn't led on any of those issues. I have, since I was 15 years old, in our community. And yes, some of them translate over to national issues, but to have someone who knows the people of this community and knows the neighborhood, I think is going to be more advantageous, both to be a national leader and to actually fight for the people of this district.
Candidate Smith?
I mean, I think that it's incredibly important to recognize that there are a lot of things that are important to a lot of people. But the people of this district still need healthcare, the people of this district still need infrastructure. And I mean, I disagree. I think we have a unique opportunity in this district to take that fight to a national level and also focus on a local level as well. A national platform affects the people in this district. That's why it's important to them. That's why they read my platform. That's why we have 23 pages of policy. But it's important to have that national platform and also recognize how it couples into local district, to the locality of the district. And I do. I've spent a lot of time figuring that out. And the reason that I haven't been able to do as much as I would have liked to is because it's hard being a working class woman who can't afford to not eat and not have a roof over her head.
Well, that brings us to the next question that you touched on a bit. You talked about working with local communities, the importance of diversity, and bringing those voices into leadership. So now you're sitting here as an older white gentleman. How do you balance amplifying voices with speaking over them? If true representation is being able to amplify someone else's voice and being able to let them speak to their own issues, do you feel like you've done that effectively?
Absolutely, it's very simple. I don't speak over them. I listen and I learn and then I lead. I listen to the people of my district in terms of what happens. And I really disagree with what Sarah just said. Look, I know this is not the first generation in the history of our country to struggle. All right, you know, I grew up in a 1,000 square foot house in pretty close to poverty. I was on free and reduced lunch when my father went on strike. You know, I started working on issues when I was 15, and I've been working a job since I was 11. I don't think it's an acceptable excuse to say as a candidate for Congress, well, I had to work to put a roof over my head. Well, so did I, okay? And even before I got elected to the state senate at 25, I was volunteering to pass school levies. I volunteered on the North Seatock Community Council to help combat the gang problem we had. I tutored an at-risk kid. I was involved in the local Kiwanis Club. So I think involvement in the community does, in fact, matter. It gives you some evidence as to whether or not one of us is going to be able to lead on the issues that matter most to you. I think that matters.
Same question to you.
So, I mean, I take the same perspective. I don't speak over voices that matter. It's been important to me to learn about people. That's why I've posted listening posts. That's why I've gone and met with members of the community. That's why I've reached out to as many communities as I can get to. That's why my calendar, if you scroll through my phone, never ends. It is constantly going. It's been important to me to reach out and be involved with as many people as I can over the course of this campaign, because learning those voices and learning what's unique to those voices is important. And I mean, you know, the fact is that a post-recession America is incredibly different now. Minimum wage doesn't cover a roof over your head. It barely covers a room to rent downtown. What you need to be making on average to get a 2-bedroom apartment in this area is about $21 an hour. And that's for a 2-bedroom apartment. And it doesn't include utilities, it doesn't include childcare, it doesn't include groceries, that's just for rent. So things have changed, and they've changed in this district, and we're seeing it as we get priced out farther, as our wages stay stagnant and fall, and as we struggle to cover healthcare costs. That's an important thing to keep in mind when we're talking about these answers.
Additional time?
Yeah, I didn't start working for my community when I wanted to get elected to office, okay? I started working for my community when I was 15 years old and I saw things that I cared about in the community. So it's great if you decide you want to be in Congress or you want to be in the Senate, and then you decide, okay, I'm going to go out and talk to people in the community. That's not what I did. I wanted to be a leader in my community. I didn't know if I wanted to run for office. I didn't know what was going to happen. I got to law school, figured out I did not want to be a lawyer. And an opportunity was created. You got to lead in your community before you stand up in front of everybody and say, elect me. I think that's important.
I think we're in this wave where we're encouraging young people to stand up for office, but we don't really want to offer them any encouragement when they do stand up and run for office. When they've lived these experiences that we've had, when they've experienced the problems that we've had, that matters. That's important, and that is significant. And when they stand up and they go to fight back and they fight for us, and they fight for people that are suffering under the same conditions that they're suffering under, that's important, and that matters. And it seems as though every time a millennial stands up to challenge someone, someone says, wait, no, not like that.
So what have you done specifically to reach out to the community and different elements in the community, whether it's LGBT population, disabled population, communities of color? what specific strategies have you employed to listen and determine the concerns of the communities?
Well, we have a variety of different community councils, groups that we meet with regularly on a wide variety of issues. We meet with the Korean American community, we meet with the Latino community, we meet with the Chinese American community. So basically, you can take any legislative district if you're looking at it as a representative and say, okay, there's 700,000 people, well, what groups do they belong to? So I have a very aggressive outreach plan within my office where we meet regularly with veterans, with small business owners, with technology leaders, and say, what are the issues? And then from that we build and we work on issues. It's pretty basic. I remember when I first got elected in 1996, I sat down and said, well, who are the people of the 9th District? Different then. And I brought up 35 different groups and said, let's go meet with them and listen to them. So we're constantly thinking of ways to reach out to new groups in the district. And this is a very active district. It's much more challenging than the old district. There are a lot more groups. But what we do is we meet in the groups and bring them in and have that conversation. And again, I wish I had more than a minute, but that's what we do.
And the same question to you as it pertains to your campaign and what you would plan to do in office.
Sure, as a scrappy grassroots grant campaign that's all volunteer run, we've done something similar. We've gone to different calendars, we've looked at different major communities, we've talked to different community leaders. We've tried to do as much outreach as we possibly can, to the point that I have 2 people that are working on this all the time, and my calendar is constantly changing for who I'm meeting with. We've been focused on getting in touch with people where they're at too, so we're emailing people back and forth to see how we can talk to them. But the number one question we ask folks is, when elected, how do you plan to hold us accountable? And so we try to work on that. We work on how can the community hold the office accountable? How can they hold me accountable to continue on those outreach programs, to continue those outreach efforts? That's been one of the number one things that we've talked about every single time new folks are walking through the door. Ask my volunteers that too. Every single time they sign on to volunteer, I ask them, how can you hold me accountable as a representative for you? That's been something that's incredibly important. We've been doing something similar, not dissimilar at all. We've been making it to the hundreds of meetings that we have all the time. I think I've put 20,000 miles on my car in the last 6 months. So yes, it's a lot of work, but it's worth it.
Additional time?
Well, additional time is again to say that that's what Sarah's done in her campaign. We mentioned that, no, you don't have to be an elected official to run for office. That would be counterintuitive. Pramila Jayapal, great example. She set up One America. She was a leader in our community. Then she ran for office. Rebecca Saldana set up an organization here in the Puget Sound region as well, and then ran for office. I have a record of accomplishment on these issues, and my opponent decided to run for office and then decided to get to know her district. Personally, I just think it should go in the other order.
Additional time?
So I actually started this process about 6 months before I did decide to run for office. I already did start to reach out to organizations and speak with them and work with people. And I was moving around the district talking to people. I didn't really know where to start, so I picked up and I went to the nonprofit route. And that's when I made the decision in April that I would run. And that's after I put the time in to go out and meet with people and talk to folks in the district who let me know that they were ready for change. And that's one of the driving factors for my campaign, is the people I talked to said they were ready for change.
We hear terms like single payer and like Medicare for all. What do you think is the correct path forward for healthcare?
Well, I think there are 3 things. One, I'm a co-sponsor of Medicare for All. I think Medicare for All is a good approach, and I hope we are able to get the votes to pass it so that we cover everybody. And I know Sarah will disagree with me on what I'm about to say now, because we've done this a couple times. But there are other ways to get to universal access. There are systems. France has the best healthcare system in the world in every measurement. They don't have single payer. They have a multi-payer, government-run system. Everyone's guaranteed healthcare. So yes, I'm going to be a little bit more flexible if it gets us to getting everybody covered. I'm not saying this is the one, the only plan. It has to be this one. I understand you bring coalitions together in complex ways, and there are systems all over the world that work quite well. Also, it's worth noting that even before, we'd love to get to single payer universal access tomorrow, we have to fix the Affordable Care Act, because the Republicans are destroying it and literally killing people right now by gutting our healthcare system. Patty Murray has a bipartisan bill that would fix the Affordable Care Act, shore it up. So that's one of the first things we need to do, is at least protect the people we can now, and then work as hard as we can, as quickly as we can, to get you everybody being covered, as I said in my opening statement.
Candidate Smith?
So one thing that I'm a little disappointed on is that the congressman signed on to the Support the People's platform, which included a pledge that he signed to push forward for single payer as often as could. And that's what I believe in. I believe in a single payer healthcare system. I believe in everybody in, nobody out. And when you look at these other countries, when you talk about multi-payer, what we have now is a commercial multi-payer system. It's where we're giving our money to private health insurance companies and then they're sending us to hospitals. It's not much different. The only difference is it uses government money to force us to pay those private health insurance companies money. So instead of paying for health care, we're paying for health insurance. So one of the things to keep in mind is the way our system is set up, the way money is allowed to affect our political system, the way it's allowed to affect our voice in Congress, it will not work the way we have it set up now. Single payer is the only way forward. It ensures that every single person has coverage when they need it and doctors can provide care and not deal with insurance bureaucracy.
Additional time?
If you think France and Germany have the exact same healthcare system that we have, then you need to learn a lot more about healthcare policy. They don't. They cover everybody. They require it. It is a huge difference from our system. So it's not the system you described. And also, even the single payer systems that you talk about, Canada and the UK are the best examples. They have private insurance too, and they have private providers. So the system you're describing doesn't actually exist. And I am not going to say, I know exactly what it has to be, and if it's not that, then we're just not going to do it. Like I said, I want to get everybody covered. There's a lot of different ways to do it, and I hope we are intelligent about how we approach that.
So single payer is, what it does is single payer provides a baseline for government insurance for everybody, so everybody's insured. Private insurance companies are still welcome to exist. They're still welcome to offer different things, different features, different opportunities for people, and if people want to pay the exorbitant amount of fees, they can. But the fact is a single payer system will ensure that every person can walk into a hospital or a doctor's office and get the care that they need when they need it in the way that that doctor wants to provide. So all it does is it creates government competition within the market. And if the private health insurance company can't compete, that's not the fault of single payer.
So what can be done specifically to address prescription drug prices? A lot of people are struggling with those. What can be done?
Yeah, I'm struggling with that as well. I've had 3 hip surgeries. I've been down that road and just quite a bit of battle with my pharmacy over the last 2 or 3 days. I think there are a couple of things. Number one is the single payer healthcare system, or universal access to healthcare system, so that the government has the buying power. And that is the big difference. That's also what France and Germany and some of these other countries do, is they regulate what they will pay for and how much they will pay for it. The best way to get to affordable prescription drugs is to get a universal access to healthcare system. Other thing we can do is we can allow Medicare to negotiate better for prices. But I'll tell you, a third thing we can do is to, and this was part of the Affordable Care Act that too many people chickened out on, and that is to regulate what prescriptions you're going to pay for. We shouldn't, let drug companies advertise and convince people what they ought to do. There ought to be a board that says, is this effective? Is this actually going to help? And if it isn't, we're not going to pay for it just to put more money in the pockets of pharmaceutical companies. We haven't followed through on that aspect of the Affordable Care Act.
So the way that HR 676, the Medicare for All bill, is written is it does allow for bargaining for prescription prices. It allows for that. It's a comprehensive bill that covers everything, including vision and dental, and it covers whatever you need. And it allows for the government to be able to negotiate drug prices with pharmaceutical companies. And one of the things we can do in the interim while we're fighting for single payer is we can lift that ban that we have right now on Medicare to be able to bargain. We can fight for that. There was a bill that came up in the Senate that got struck down that would have allowed us to import cheaper and more affordable drugs from Canada. That's the kind of bill that we need to put back up and get back in the hands of our senators and our House officials in order to get that voted into law, because in the interim it will allow us to alleviate those astronomical prices for people.
I would simply add again, you got to look at the record, and I did vote for the Affordable Care Act, which wasn't perfect, but it reduced the number of uninsured in this country to the lowest level that it had ever been. And that was not an easy vote back in the old district that I represented. So I have shown leadership in this issue. I've always said I have a masochistic fascination with healthcare policy. It's a very difficult issue to take on, but it's the one issue that every constituent cares about. Every constituent is connected to, so it's always been very important to me.
So what it did also do is it also left millions of people underinsured as well.
most people, it's not just that they're uninsured, it's that they have insurance that they can't even use. They have deductibles that are too high, that they will never be able to meet, and so they're still not using their insurance. And with the Affordable Health Care Act, we had the majority. We did not have to negotiate as much as we did, but we did because we were trying to keep private health insurance companies in the loop. And we need to get them out of it because they're not in there because they care about us. They're in there because they're in it to make a profit.
Well, now we have some questions that were submitted from the audience. Appreciate these. So the first is for Congressman Smith. Why did you vote for the Iraq War and the Patriot Act, and do you regret it now?
I certainly regret the vote for the Iraq War, and basically at the time, what we voted to do was to authorize the president to go to war if Saddam Hussein did not allow in an intrusive inspection regime. Well, he did. He allowed an intrusive inspection regime in, and the president went to war anyway, which never should have happened. You know, I was 5-6 years into my term in Congress, and mostly I had seen the bitter debate during the Bill Clinton era, the partisanship that was involved, and I wanted to support our country and support our president if possible. That was naive, I would rage. It was also 16 years ago, and that's part of what experience brings. You learn from your mistakes, and I've said over and over again that that was clearly a mistake. The Patriot Act, there are aspects of it that I have since voted against and don't like, but the basic premise behind the Patriot Act was our intelligence organizations and law enforcement organizations were not communicating. They weren't, that's what happened on 9/11. We knew those hijackers were there, but one group wasn't talking, the other group wasn't talking to the other group. And I know the defense budget is not popular, particularly in this room, but we have national security needs. I was in Washington, D.C. on 9/11. We all saw what happened. It was a failure of our government. Our agencies were not working together to protect us. This was an effort to try to confront that. And since then, there have been some revisions in it, and certainly it wasn't perfect. But after 9/11, there was a definite feeling of crisis in this country and threat that we needed to respond to.
Rebuttal?
I mean, my rebuttal was pretty personal. I've buried friends in that war, and we went to it based off of a lie that we were told. And then no action was taken when we discovered it was a lie. Nothing happened. And we're still over there. We just, shift whatever country we're fighting in. We're still embroiled in all of these wars. We're still over there. The war in the Middle East is 17 years old. It's going to be legally able to vote next year. And I'm tired of burying friends. And I'm tired of sitting at your kitchen tables with friends of mine who are struggling with PTSD during 4th of July.
No, I don't disagree. I've been to a ton of funerals. I've been
Well,
to
you're
Iraq
fired.
several times.
You are fired. I'm tired of burying my kids. You're fired. You're
Yes.
fired.
You
Go on,
had your vote, sir. and
Go on,
you're
you're fired, bro. I ain't done with you.
Is that a threat, sir?
You're fired. That's what that is. I'm
Let's
not
please
threatening you.
limit
I'm
the
saying you're gonna be
outbursts.
prosecuted for what you did.
And if I may
This is
say
coming out,
so,
sir.
this is exactly what I was talking about earlier.
The facts are coming out,
it
sir.
is-
You can't hide forever, Adam. You're fired, bro.
Yeah, thank you. In this job, you can't hide for 10 seconds. It's just the nature of the job. You are accountable for what you do, and I'm very much aware of that. I've been doing it for some time, and I accept that.
Why
And
can't you
always
just
have.
retire then?
I'm sorry?
Why can't you just retire if you made such a mistake?
I don't believe that my record is such that I should. I think I represented this district and represented this district very well. I have been reelected, I can't count how many times since that vote, which, as I said, I regret. And I know a lot of people are angry about it, and I don't blame them at all. That's part of the problem with being in this job. It is a highly responsible position, and you have to take positions that are going to have consequences. But I have the experience of having taken those votes, of having to live with the consequences of those votes. And the gentleman who was shouting at me as he went out, he's going to vote against me. And a lot of people are going to shout at me, and that's the nature of being a public official. But this is the issue that I was getting at earlier. We have to be able to have a dialogue without simply shouting people down. So, I'm not backing down. He can say I'm fired all he wants. I grew up in this district. I have fought for the people of this district. I have helped people. I have helped people not be foreclosed on. I have helped people get the benefits they deserve. I have provided health care to people through a vote. I am proud of the record I have in this district. And if people out there want to fire me, well, that's what Sarah's here for. Come and get me. Let's have a representative democracy. Let's have a vote. And I will keep fighting for what I believe in and the people I believe in. And I completely respect people's ability to say, nope, don't like it, going to vote against you.
I appreciate that the congressman regrets that vote, because that one's really personal, hard one for me to look at. And I do agree that we do need to have discourse about this, but this is what I was talking about with people's pain points. This is why we can't just pretend that the vote didn't happen. We can't just pretend the war didn't happen. We have to focus on what is bringing people pain. How can we alleviate that pain? How can we stop that pain? And the way we can stop that pain is we can stop going to war in every other country every time I wake up. We can stop having new occupations. We can scale back our presence. We can scale back the amount of money we're funneling into the private military industrial complex. We can scale back the amount of times that we're sending our sons and daughters to go die overseas while we're struggling here at home and we're suffering to keep roofs over our heads. But that's what I'm talking about finding people's pain points and trying to speak to it and legislate to it. That's also important. It's equally as important to find out the root cause of that pain as it is to just endure the onslaught of that pain. When someone is angry or upset or furious, they are going to shout you down. It does happen. And your role is to stand fast for them and ask them, how can I help you? How can I make this pain go away for you? And talk to that and legislate to that. It's just as important.
Well, we're going to move on to another question from the audience. What is your stance on charter schools? More specifically, do you think we should be concerned about the impact the new Green Dot Charter School on Rainier Avenue would have on our local South End public schools? This is to both candidates, and we'll start with candidate Smith.
So I think charter schools have arisen because we have inadequate funding in our public school system. Charter schools arose because public schools are not getting what they need in order to provide a quality education for our kids. And I've sat down with people that have come and talked to me about charter schools and asked questions about them. Some of them have their kids in them. And I've had long discussions about the importance of making sure that we are properly and adequately funding public education so that need doesn't need to exist. Because this is where you find these schools that are popping up that are doing this for profit. That are doing this to make profit off of tax dollars, that are not producing the results that are on par with the same public school system. But it's because we've constrained our public school system so much that they're not able to provide that education people want for their children. And this is about equity of opportunity. This is a moment for us to uncouple public education funding from your zip code, because your zip code shouldn't be determining your future. You should be able to go to any public school and be able to get a quality education, but that's not the case, and that's why charter schools exist. And this is something that we need to address on a state and federal level, is being able to provide enough funding for public schools that charter schools don't need to be part of the process.
Charter schools do not need to be part of the process. I oppose charter schools, and I strongly support public schools, and I think they are denigrated way, way too much. I went to the Highline public schools, Bow Lake, Chinook, and Tide. That's not a great zip code. I got a good education. And I think when you say that, well, we're not getting a decent public education, I think in Kent, in Federal Way, I think in these schools, we have teachers, we have educators who are working their butts off every day to provide high quality education to kids. What we need to do is we need to support public schools, not undercut them by trashing them and supporting charter schools. And by the way, when it comes to, well, we should have innovation. We have innovation within our public schools, just in my district, the Federal Way Public Academy. It would be a charter school, but it is within the confines of the Federal Way School District. It's incredibly innovative. We have the Tacoma School for the Arts. We have the Bellevue International School. We have Raisback Aviation High School, all within the public school system. Charter schools are a ruse. They are an effort to undermine public schools. The reason we have charter schools is because people don't want to step up, do the work, and support public schools, and they wind up undercutting public schools by pushing charter schools and taking kids out and taking money out of public schools. We innovate in this state, but we do it with the security of the state and the school district. Not a charter school that you can show up the next day, well, sorry, we ran out of money, we're no longer in business. We have incredibly innovative public schools. We need to support public schools. All charter schools do is undermine that.
I don't think we differ too much on our belief on charter schools then. I mean, the fact of the matter is they're under-resourced. Teachers are overstretched. We're seeing layoffs across the district. I mean, we're also seeing the effects of income inequality in our public education here in this district. We're watching as teachers are being laid off in South Seattle, but there's nobody being laid off in the Issaquah School District. We're seeing inadequate funding because we focus too much on property value and not enough on giving kids proper education and giving teachers the resources and the funding they need to provide that education. But I think we both believe in a robust public education system.
Well, I want to say, this came up in a previous debate. I mean, Sarah, you said the only opportunity you had to vote on a school levy in this district was in 2018. Your vote was not recorded. You said it was lost in the mail, that's fine. But then you said you voted against it. You voted against the basic school levy that funds public schools. And you talked about how all the taxes aren't really quite fair. And yeah, they could be fairer, they could be better, but it's a property tax at least, not a sales tax, so it's based at least somewhat on income. And it is the pure base of whether or not you support public schools. So the one election you had while you were living close to the district, you voted against supporting our public schools. When I was 18 years old, I volunteered for Citizens for Public Schools to pass levies and bonds to support the schools that the people in my community went to. So I don't think that's supporting public schools.
So you yourself, Congressman, said that we have one of the most brutally regressive tax systems in the entire nation. And we agreed on that. But levies are one of the most regressive forms of taxation. And what's happening is Kent is a working class area. Kent is a working class city. Our average income is $60,000. And we're asking people to choose between their child's education or being able to afford to keep the roof over their heads. We're asking people to make this impossible choice. And so it was a hard vote for me to vote no on that levy. And it was incredibly difficult for me to make that decision. But the fact is we were going to be pricing out the people of that area in order to fund the schools where they want to send their kids. So they wouldn't have even been able to send their kids to those schools. And these are people living paycheck to paycheck. These are people living who are struggling in real conditions where it is actually difficult for them to keep a roof over their heads and put food in their mouths at the same time. Levies are a regressive form of taxation, and part of the problem is that we need to be fighting for adequate funding from a federal level as well to ensure that they're getting that funding, and we don't need to be asking working class people to make that choice anymore. And you yourself agreed with me not so long ago.
I didn't agree with you on that point. We have a regressive tax system. The school levy system is not the big regressive part of it. The reliance on the B&O tax and the sales tax are the big part of it. Look, if a community can't vote for a basic levy to support public schools, look, I can agree that when you pile on a whole bunch of other things, but public schools are fundamental, and I think you ought to be able to support that.
Well, after this next round of yes or no questions, we're going to have a short announcement from the representative from the Chamber of Commerce. So you have your agree and disagree paddles there, and there are just a few questions.
Which I'm curious, by the way, since we're on radio, how does this work?
It's being broadcast via Facebook Live.
Yeah.
But we will announce while we do. All right, so we'll have our first part of these questions here, and we'll do the others later. First question, should Trump be impeached?
That's not a yes or no question.
That's a yes or no question right now.
Yeah. You gotta have a trial.
So is that a lawful?
No, I mean, it's an honest answer. You say, well, let's just impeach him. Let's skip the trial.
Do
Let's
you
go ahead and
believe-
impeach him. I believe we should begin impeachment proceedings. Absolutely.
Sarah's a yes.
I believe that part of the impeachment process is having the robust case against him, but I think we have plenty and more than enough that we can start moving forward.
Exactly. But we spoke about this before. We did the same answer. You just can't, you didn't ask, should we be
Okay.
right now?
So next question, next yes or no question. Should Al Franken have resigned? That's a yes.
Can I just say,
Congressman
it's
Smith.
kind of weird, but anyway, okay, it's fine.
You just put one in each hand.
Next question. Should we grant blanket amnesty to undocumented immigrants who have resided here for at least 5 years?
This is ridiculous. This is
Sarah's a yes.
I'm sorry, 5 years, that's all we know?
Congressman
No.
Smith is a no. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
Yes, you see, that's a yes or no question. All right, and public policy questions are not like hot dogs, so.
Are you a no?
I'm a no, but I don't have a good reason, it just feels wrong.
Are you a yes?
I think you're just being disagreeable.
I missed you. Were you a yes or a
I
no?
was a yes.
You're a yes.
It's a controversial topic.
Yes.
Should Congress compel Trump to release his taxes?
Now that,
We have a simple yes from both. Do you think corporate money is a corrupt force in politics? Candidate Smith is a yes. Congressman Smith is a yes. Do you support Black Lives Matter? Both candidates are a yes. Is blocking traffic a valid form of peaceful protest? Is that a yes? Both
Well,
candidates. Both candidates
should
are
I show it
yes.
to you or show it to you? I'll show it to you. and then you can
There
see
we
it.
go.
Yeah, okay.
And our last question before we move forward with the announcement is, have you smoked marijuana since it's been legalized in Washington State? Candidate Smith is a yes. Congressman Smith is a no. All right, so now we'll move for the announcement.
Should we come up?
Hi, folks. Gonna lighten it up a little bit in the room, just a little bit. I want to just thank you. I'll introduce myself. My name is Megan Arno. I am the 2018 president of the Columbia City Business Association, not the chamber, just for the record. And I just want to thank the community for coming out and being participants in what I feel is a very important community engagement. I want to invite all people here to consider membership in the Columbia City Business Association. We are open to residents and members of the community. We hold public events such as this and gatherings for celebrations throughout the neighborhood. We are an all-volunteer organization. We thrive, we survive on the support of the community, and so we appreciate you all coming out this evening. Really appreciate both candidates coming out to share their points of view with our community, and I guess I'll leave it at that. Thank you everyone for being out tonight. And it's a wonderful night, and it's very Cheers to all.
Thank you very much. All right, so moving on. Philosophical question somewhat. Is capitalism a force for good?
Yes, overall, I believe that it is. It needs to be aggressively regulated, and I'm wrong for this little thing.
We're just that for a
And
moment.
I will quote Adam Smith, just because I like saying that. And a lot of people misunderstand Adam Smith. Adam Smith said capitalism was the best form of government. He also wrote thousands of pages about how you had to regulate it aggressively to make sure that it wasn't abusing people. In fact, he has one of my all-time favorite quotes, which is, whenever two or more business people gather in one place, it is to conspire against the public good. Capitalism is the best system, but you better have an aggressive government out there regulating it and holding it accountable. Government shouldn't be running businesses, okay? I believe in the free market, I believe in entrepreneurs, I believe in investment. It's our job as public officials to make sure that they're not abusing their power. And we need to work very, very hard to do that, and I have done so, as I mentioned, on a number of issues, voting against the tax cuts, favoring a carbon tax, opposing the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Only member of the congressional delegation to do that. You gotta stand up to capitalism, but it is the
Bailing out
best
the
economic
financial and
system.
moral tools of Wall Street.
Your answer?
I believe that a system that doesn't empower workers as much as we can, we might need to rethink that system. And, you know, I guess capitalism unregulated has its place somewhere, but I don't think that's here. I think we need a system that makes sure that all workers have a voice in their economy as much as they have a voice in their society. We need to make sure that we're empowering the people who create and generate wealth to enjoy and experience that wealth. Because the system we have now elevates the billionaire class. I believe they're earning, 900 times more than the lowest paid worker in this country. That's not a just system. That's not a just economic system. That doesn't empower workers as much as we can. We need to rethink how it is that we view our economic system. And if capitalism isn't the way that we empower those workers to enjoy the fruits of their labor or be a part of their economy, then maybe we need a new system.
But we don't know what that system is. I mean, I said exactly the same things. Yes, it has to be capitalism, it has to be regulated. But to say that we need a new system and not have one is a bit troubling in terms of what it's going to mean for the economy. And I want to address the bailout issue. Our entire economy was roughly $37 trillion in debt. If Congress hadn't acted to stop that hemorrhaging debt, you think that the recession in 2008 was bad? The entire Western economy would have collapsed. I didn't love that bill, but it saved not just rich people. It saved a ton of poor people from being evicted from their homes, and I know that it wasn't perfect, but making the perfect the enemy of the good hurts poor people. We hadn't passed that bill. Think about where poor people would be in this country right now.
I mean, I think that we also had the opportunity to look at a bailout for the people that were suffering under those big bankers. Nobody put forward a bill to help the people that lost their homes when Wall Street gambled and lost with our futures. Nobody put anything forward to help us. And we're still suffering from the effects of that recession, and it's slated to be even worse for the generation that comes after us. And so if capitalism is not the right system that helps empower that, maybe we need to look at a more socially governed economic system.
That's simply not true. We passed a number of bills that were specifically aimed at helping people stop from foreclosure. I forget the full names of them. There was a ton of money poured into that. In my office, I know, and you know too, you were working for Citibank, you were working in the foreclosure department, you know exactly what went on. There were federal programs that I voted for and passed in my office, helping, I think at least dozens, probably hundreds of people stay in their homes because of those bills that we passed, that we all conveniently forget because we're focused on our anger. We did do that, and it did help keep people in their homes.
So rolling on with that, do you consider those programs that you passed to be effective and a success?
Not as effective as they should have been, but given the scale of the problem that we were in, given the sheer amount of debt that was out there, and my goodness, I mean, look at the companies that got engaged in doing these debt-backed securities. Countrywide Financial was at the epicenter of this. They figured out they could loan money to anyone, put them in a house, sell the loan, make money. They didn't have to worry about being paid back. So given how much debt was run up, how many people were given loans that they shouldn't have been given, to think that you had some society say, wow, we would be a lot better place if we hadn't passed that bill. There is no miracle easy answer to this, all right? Once that debt was allowed, once George W. Bush had allowed basically the regulatory agencies to do nothing, you know, and Bill Clinton too. Yes, there was not sufficient regulation, but it happened primarily under George W. Bush, okay? To think that you could make up a $37 trillion debt just like that, that's just not the way it works. So, you know, we dug a hole that we need to dig out. I'll grant you that. But it's not true that we didn't do anything to help people who were struggling.
I mean, my job was actually to help implement those programs, and I was actually in it. I was actually sitting there at a computer trying desperately to help as many people as I could avoid foreclosure. And I can tell you from experience actually doing the work, they did not help nearly as many people as we needed to have helped. The people that were going into foreclosure, the people that were desperately trying to avoid going into short sale, they were people that needed help. They needed more than what we were giving them, and we gave them less than we gave the bankers. We didn't even prosecute the folks on Wall Street who caused it to happen in the first place. We didn't do anything.
But, yeah, I'm sorry. But you worked for Citibank. Okay?
Yes,
I
and
was
you'll notice
there
I don't
working
work
to try
for
to help
them.
them. Citibank wasn't trying to help people. They were foreclosing on them.
So you are...
We were trying to help people by trying to create programs that could help them stay in their house.
So, are you blaming the worker for the effects of the company? Do you think I had anything to do with the foreclosure?
I'm blaming
Citibank
the
was
company.
practicing?
You said that Citibank was trying to help people.
I was trying to help people.
You were working for Citibank.
Trying to help people as
That's
an
what
organ foreclosure
Citibank wanted you to do.
Are you saying, Congressman Smith, that you feel that
No, what I'm
Sarah
saying,
Smith had more of a responsibility?
no, I'm just
I
saying,
believe he
I'm
is.
saying that to imply that Citibank was trying to help people is not my memory of.
Implying Citibank was trying to help people by telling you I, the worker, was doing everything I could. You know, I actually reached out to Fannie Mae directly to fight for a woman who was a nurse with 3 kids, who was in danger of losing her home.
And
I worked
did I.
directly with
Countless
her.
instances.
I went beyond what I was supposed to do as an employee of a company. I went and I fought for her because I believed in her situation. I knew she needed help and she was desperate. And I went around the and I am proud of that as a worker of that company. I defied my company and I went to help that woman and make sure she stayed in her home. And I am proud of that. And I will never not be proud of that.
Any rebuttal, Congressman Smith?
No, I said she should be.
Any additional, Candidate Smith?
I am extremely proud of that, and I will never, ever hold a worker responsible for what their CEOs and their board of executives are doing. Ever. It is not our responsibility to work with them. It is not our responsibility to prop them up and help them make more profits, but we do what we can to help each other. In service industries, we do everything we can to make sure we all have the best quality of life because the folks at the top are not going to do it for us. I will never blame the worker for doing everything they were capable of doing.
Well, and do you feel, Congressman Smith, like we owe any more to people who are struggling with foreclosure, who are struggling
Absolutely.
with the effects of the financial crisis caused by the big banks?
Absolutely. I mean, we owe more affordable housing to begin with. I co-sponsored a bill with Susan Delvini is taking the lead on to increase the affordable housing tax credit. We need to do a lot more to create affordable housing because that's the other part of this problem. Absolutely, we owe a lot more to those people to try to make sure that they can have an affordable place to live. We owe a lot more to the homeless people in this community.
Do you have any specific plans?
Well, I just said,
with that?
increase the tax credits for people who do that, increase Section 8, increase the amount of money that is available for affordable housing that's provided on the federal level. Yes, we need to do that. I'll also say in the homeless crisis, it comes back to health care. We need to make a better investment in mental health care and in drug treatment. There are people who want treatment in both those areas who can't get it, which brings us right back to where I started. We need a universal health care system so that everybody has access to health care. We owe a ton more to those people who are struggling. We would be better served if we didn't have a Republican Congress and Donald Trump as president in our efforts to do that.
I believe we owe a lot more. I mean, anybody who's grown up in the post-recession America is part of that generation that's suffering. And it's getting worse. I mentioned it earlier. The folks that are coming after us are going to have it even worse than we are. But it's more than just housing. It's also education. It's the ability to be able to go and get whatever education you need that works for you, whether that's technical school, vocational school, or university, so you can find the right career path and be able to afford enough to keep that roof over your head. Specifically when it comes to plans, I'm a big fan of the Housing for All initiative. It's something that, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has talked about. It's a plan that makes sure we're building 10 million homes over 15 years to ensure that people are able to have jobs, able to have a roof over their heads, and able to stop worrying about that kind of thing. And it's also why I believe in single payer, because medical bankruptcy is the leading cause of bankruptcy in this country. And we can't just look at homelessness and try to solve it at the end. We have to try and solve it at the beginning. We have to look at what causes it. And medical bankruptcy is one of the #1 ways that people are experiencing that. There is so much more that we can be doing to help people and to fight for people. And after 22 years, it has not gotten better, it has gotten worse.
I don't cover all that. I think we need to work on those programs, and I agree. It has become a greater and greater challenge, and we need to continue to do more.
A question from KVRU listeners. What can be done to provide free college access?
So the how do you pay for it question is actually my favorite question. So I'm a big fan of, Bernie Sanders talked about it on the presidential campaign trail. I'm currently paying $800 a month for student loans, and it is ridiculous. And people out there have it worse than me. People in this audience probably have it worse than me. But what we can do is we can talk about the Robin Hood tax. It's a speculative tax on Wall Street. It's a 0.5% tax on every dollar that's traded on Wall Street, and it's earmarked specifically for education. There's an estimated generation of wealth of about $375 billion that we can specifically put into higher education and into education in general.
And I agree. I'm a co-sponsor of that bill in the House. I think that's a good way to do it. The one thing I would add, which I always add, community and technical colleges and apprenticeships and that type of training should be just as accessible as college. There are a lot of people out there that could find good jobs through vocational training, through a bunch of different programs. Certainly our community and technical colleges, our unions are big leaders on apprenticeships, but there are also companies like Comcast that have I think it's like a 12-week course, $16,000 to become a cable installer for $80,000 a year. You ought to be able to get money to pay for that just as much as you're able to get money to pay for college.
So figure-wise, because I love facts and figures, you can ask anyone on my team. But so it costs $75 billion to pay for 1 year of college for every single person that's currently enrolled. That includes that whole gamut of different types of college, technical college, vocational schools, everything like that. That leaves $300 billion more to put back into K-12 education. That would allow us to invest in those job training programs, to invest in things like putting mechanic shops back into colleges, high schools, metal shops back into high schools, making sure we can work together with unions to have those apprenticeship programs so folks can choose what kind of trade do they want to go into, what kind of education do they want to define their future.
What?
No, I'm sorry. You looked at me and I thought,
I did that last time too. I had the same reaction.
We have even more audience questions. Well, let's see here. What should be done about arms sales to Saudi Arabia and the crisis in Yemen?
Well, I'm actually working with Rokan on a resolution right now to basically say that the U.S. is in violation of the War Powers Act by supporting Saudi Arabia in any way with what they're doing in Yemen. We introduced it the last week of the session and we continue to push it in November. I also think in light of what has happened with the journalist Khashoggi, we should sanction Saudi Arabia. There is no question that they basically executed a journalist that they didn't disagree with. The United States should stand up to that, sanction them. I mean, it's the same thing that Russia did when they they've done extrajudicial killings, and we sanctioned Russia. We should sanction Saudi Arabia. I think President Trump's comments on this have been embarrassing. To basically, maybe they did it, maybe they didn't. What do we care? We care a lot, because this is about freedom and freedom of the press. So we need to cut off any support for Saudi Arabia because of what's going on in Yemen, but also because of what they did with, I'm sorry, I forget the gentleman's first name, but Mr. Khashoggi, the journalist.
So Saudi Arabia has been violating human rights law for a long time. And Tulsi Gabbard's put forward a bill it's called the Stop Arming Terrorists Act. And it's geared at ending funding and ending any kind of deals with other nations that are violating by funding terrorist organizations, Saudi Arabia specifically being one of them. We've known and had knowledge that Saudi Arabia contributed to 9/11. We've had a long-standing knowledge that they've been violating human rights for a long time. We absolutely need to end arms sales to Saudi Arabia. We've been needing to do this for a long time. We've been needing to do this forever, and we need to finally have the backbone to stand up and demand better of the people around the world. And the best way to do that is end our arms sales to them.
All right, and a question specifically to you. How and why are you prepared to manage working successfully in DC without prior experience?
So I talk about experience a lot, and I think that, we talk about legislative experience when we're thinking about Congress, but lived experience matters. What we've gone through matters. Facing struggle matters. It creates the lens that you look through legislation. It lets you know what is and is not important to people. I've done a lot in my life. I've done mortgage foreclosure. I have done claims and liability negotiation. I've been a bankruptcy paralegal. I have the most dismal resume you've ever heard. My skin is thick. I am more than prepared to work with a wide variety of people. And just on like a nerdy level, and to kind of lighten the mood a little bit, I also used to main tank in World of Warcraft before it had all the expansions. And if you think that doesn't prepare you for everything as a woman online, oh my gosh, let me tell you. But I mean, Pramila Jayapal, when she went into Congress, she only had 1 year of experience in the legislature. And she is now one of the first and foremost progressive legislators that we've got. She's a leading voice in progressive legislation. So I believe that lived experience matters, what we've done in our lives matters, how we've lived matters.
I think words, and Pramila has endorsed me and supports me in this campaign, and we've worked very closely together on a wide number of issues, including immigration, because she knows that I actually am a very effective progressive voice for this district. And I think lived experience is very important as well. And that's the one big myth that I want to try to dispel. People, well, you're in Congress, you don't pay attention to your district anymore. I made the conscious choice to live in this district and raise my family in this district. So I don't just have the lived experience from delivering newspapers and growing up in a working class family in SeaTac and living here. I've raised my family I've got 3.5 million miles. I thought I had a minute. No, sorry, it's not. Anyway, I have lived experience. I raised my family here. I'm connected to this district. I think that helps me be an effective representative.
All right, if we have people in the audience who want to ask questions, you can start lining up now and we'll start taking them after this next round of questions.
Are these yes or no?
So before we get to those questions, while people are lining up, we've heard a lot about the Me Too movement. We've seen allegations locally and nationally for both candidates. How has your understanding of consent changed or evolved over the last couple of decades? We've certainly seen things evolve societally and in media. And what do you think we need to be doing in our communities? What kind of conversations need to be happening in families to make sure that people are respected, period? Go ahead.
Yeah, my opinion hasn't changed on that. No means no, period. And that is something that should be 100% clear, and I think it is just a tragedy that it's taken this long to get to a Me Too movement, to have all of these public figures exposed in the way that they have been, for being the sexual predators that they've gotten away with. Bill Cosby, Harvey Weinstein. It is good that we have been awakened to that, and I think we need to continue to push forward with that, because that's never been acceptable. Like I said, I haven't changed my view. I've always understood exactly that you treat people with respect 100%. That's something that I've done in my job and in my office. No matter what, as you might have noticed, people occasionally are a little bit testy when you're a member of Congress, but I treat people with respect no matter what, and women absolutely deserve to be treated with respect.
So I've openly said a lot, I am actually a sexual assault survivor. So consent is something that's situation.
All right, so we're going to move to audience questions. One thing we have a number of people in line. We want to be respectful of everyone. We're going to ask people to limit the questions and any associated comments to 30 seconds maximum. So any more of a comment than a question, let me explain to you a backstory. We want to avoid that for now, just to make sure that we can make it through everyone's questions. So we'll start on the right-hand side here, and go ahead.
I have two questions. Can I ask them both real quick?
You can pick one.
That's too bad. I really want both. But anyway, I guess the most important one is, shouldn't the banks have been nationalized instead of bailed out?
Yes. I mean, most major nations that are successful have nationalized banking systems, and for some reason we don't. But that was a prime opportunity for us to nationalize the banks and save the people instead of the bankers.
I don't think the banks should have been nationalized. I think they should have been broken up. But unfortunately, one of the things in Congress, again, I didn't necessarily get to decide on what the bill was that was going to save the economy. I think the banks should be broken up. I don't believe in the government running all of our banks, but they certainly should be broken up.
All right, moving on to the left.
Thank you. Pay-to-play treasons, foreign donor reasons, Sunni Arabs have bought Democrats and Republicans. Adam, you've overseen the military buildup of Saudi Arabia promoting weapons from the U.S. since 1996. In fact, your staff has been sent to Saudi to be lobbied by the Saudis in a week of lack of luxury. Why did you allow Saudi Arabia to be #2 on the college visa list for discounted tuition, stealing from locals' futures?
Yeah, I didn't have anything to do with that.
You keep allowing it. It's been since Obama's administration. And it's,
I'm sorry, let me know when
We've
you're
asked the
done. Let me know when
question,
you're
so we're
done.
gonna let
I'll
the
do my best to
congressman
answer.
respond.
The idea that I have been overseeing as a member of Congress the buildup is patently ridiculous.
Armed
Okay?
Services Committee, buddy.
Yeah, one member of the Armed Services Committee. I have voted against no fewer than 8 defense budgets, and certainly has.
on him now with Ro
All right, I'm sorry. That's.
I'm asking about the visa lottery. Why do you keep Saudi Arabia on the college visa lottery?
I don't, but
Well, why haven't you stepped up to take them off it since Obama's administration?
obviously I'm not going to have a chance to speak, so I will yield to Sarah.
The question was directed at the congressman. I don't know if there's much more I can say.
I believe the congressman has answered. Anything additional you'd like to say about that?
I'm not going to have people just shout at me every time I say 2 words. It reminds me of being on Fox News, and those are not pleasant memories. So,
All right, we're gonna,
Mr. Smith, you're the ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee, and if the Democrats win in November, that means you'll be the chairman. Is that correct?
yes, sir.
I understand the Trump administration has been flooding the Pentagon with funds. Will you be working for a cutback in the size of the U.S. military?
Yes, absolutely, and I have spoken out publicly about that on a number of occasions. I would urge you to go to the Washington Times and other conservative things. One of the things they're saying is you can't let the Democrats retake the majority because Adam Smith will become chairman and he wants to cut the defense budget. There are numerous stories written to that effect, and I do. And specifically, nuclear weapons. We can dramatically reduce the number of nuclear weapons that we're building. Base closure. We have way too much infrastructure. And we are also overcommitted in way too many places in the world. And there is vastly too much waste in the defense budget. And I would say, and I know that I will sort of cringe before I say this and wait for the onslaught, but to have an actual progressive member as chairman of the Armed Services Committee, and like I said, I've worked with Ro Khanna, I've worked with a ton of people on taking a non-military approach to our national security and foreign policy on a number of issues. I think that would be an asset for our district and an asset for the country.
I believe in drastically reducing the military spending budget as well, but I also think one of the things that we spend the most money on is we spend 60% of that budget on private donors who also happen to be Adam's largest donors. And I think it's incredibly important to pull the corporate influence out of our government because of that. I think that it feels like a conflict of interest, so it must be a conflict of interest. But I firmly believe that that 60% doesn't need to go out to private military contractors. We don't need mercenaries, we need soldiers that are well equipped to bring humanitarian missions to the world, help folks bring up clean water, to help us work on diplomacy before we drop bombs. I think it's important for us to focus on building up a humanitarian military that's focused on people first. And one of the best ways to do that is uncouple corporate money from the system and stop spending so much money on private military contracts.
I'm sorry, I would just say quickly, I consistently vote against a defense contract. One of my first votes in Congress was to not build more B-2 bombers, which actually was built in my district, at least a portion of it was. And that was a huge priority of Northrop. Look, I do not vote the way my donors want me to. And no member of Congress should, no matter where you get your money from. Whether you're getting it from a whole bunch of people online, no matter where you're getting it, you better put your district first. My record shows that I do put my district first, and I have consistently voted against the interests, as I mentioned, on the minimum wage, on health care, on a carbon tax, on countless defense bills. I have voted against those interests when they are not in the best interests of the country.
When a donor leaves, there's a reason they come back, and donors don't donate to people because they think they're gonna end war, especially war is their business.
next question?
Hi Adam, so you seem to be giving Sarah quite a tough time regarding her levy vote, but in the past 5 years you've missed 600 votes, so do you care to explain that, considering that's literally your job?
Yeah, absolutely, and by, just so we're clear, the 600 votes you referred to are the ones in Congress. And I get it, when I was 15 years old, a bone died in my knee, and I had major knee surgery, which I never rehabbed from, and I had 3 hip surgeries in 2015, 2016, sorry, 2014, 2015, 2016. And because actually my family lives here in the district, I had those surgeries done here, and I was unable to get back to Congress for that. I got back as soon as I could, and it was painful from time to time. But basically, I had a health problem that came up. But I got back to work, and my voting record in this session, I made 98% of the votes. But couldn't do anything about those hips.
Any additional comment?
Oh boy, I am 30 years old and I've already had one hip surgery and I'm gonna need two, so I completely understand. I have we've actually talked to physical therapists in the past. But I mean, you know, that's part of the thing. I completely feel for you, Congressman, I really do. And I'm grateful that you had the ability to take the time off that you needed to recover. And I think that that's something that it could have been used as an experience to bring back and fight for other people to have that option too. So, you know, a working mother who blows her back out at Walmart also needs as much time as she can get to recover. And that's something that, you know, it's a lived experience that should have been brought to the floor as a fight for legislation.
And it was. I am a co-sponsor of a mandatory family medical leave bill to do precisely that, that Patty Murray is the leader on, that I've worked with for some time. And I will also say that it didn't take me having it happen to me, even if that had never happened to me. I knew that it was happening to my constituents, so it was important to me before it became an issue for me.
Next question?
How do we pay for Medicare for all? What's the plan to pay for it?
We're already paying for Medicare. Sorry, I don't mean to jump in. Is it okay?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, we're already paying we're already paying for the healthcare. We're already paying for Medicare. We're already spending out hundreds of dollars and thousands of dollars in some people's case for healthcare. And if we bring a single payer system to the floor, if we have single payer out there and people are actually able to be covered by their insurance, and we're actually putting money into single payer, that's actually going to save us money in the long run. I think the conservative projected figure is about $2 trillion over about 10 years. But it's a cost-saving, cost-effective method of covering everybody. But it can be done, it should be done. We're already paying for everybody that's uninsured. We're already paying for Medicare. We're already paying thousands of dollars in premiums, but we're not getting the coverage that we need or coverage that we can even use. So if we're paying less than that money every single month, and we're putting it towards a single-payer system where we're guaranteed health care, then everybody's able to have usable health care they can actually work with their doctors on.
And I completely agree with that. There is an uncomfortable part of that answer, though, that I don't think enough of us who advocate for universal health care and single payer mention, and that is that we pay a lot of money for our health care system. How do we save that money and bring it back? Well, part of it is we pay for quantity, not for quality. We pay for tests and drugs and surgeries. And part of the way that Canada and Great Britain and even France and Germany and other countries I've talked about control their costs is they say, that's not medically necessary, we're not going to pay for it. Which sounds fine, unless it happens to be something that you think you or a member of your family really needs. Now that's not to say that this is a better system, but let's be honest about the choices that we're going to face. And if you're that, you're going to want every little bit of care that you can get. 50% of Medicare asks are denied. If you're on Medicare, you've had this experience. Sorry, we're not going to pay for that. It is not a cure-all for those problems. It's a much better, fairer healthcare system, but we're going to have to work to make sure that it actually delivers for people in a cost-effective way to get to those savings that Sarah mentioned. She's already right. We're already spending an obnoxious amount of money on healthcare. This is not going to drive that up.
All right, next question.
So we're blessed with a choice between two candidates claiming a progressive mantle. That's kind of like the Ocasio-Cortez battle against Crowley, a 10-term incumbent, but the 28-year-old won. And I think the reason she won is she said things like, later on TV, like, in a wealthy and moral America, no person should be too poor to live. I think what we need for our Congress seat here is voice. Anybody can vote, anybody can listen, anybody can be civil, but what we need is not disruption, but voice. So Congressman Smith, I'd like you to take any issue you want and show us your passion, kind of like Ocasio-Cortez did when she said no person should be too poor.
You haven't seen me around very much if you haven't seen my passion.
It's a softball question.
I can give you 10, but I'll give you one, and it's healthcare, okay? It's having access to healthcare. And the way I always describe it is I grew up in a struggling family. struggling for a lot of different reasons, not all of which I want to get into here. And I was powerless to help them. When my father died when I was 19 years old, United Airlines did not pay his death benefit for months. I was 19 years old, my mother was going crazy. I couldn't do anything to help her, and that killed me, okay? When I found out she didn't have health insurance when she died, same thing. So, I wanted to be in a position of power so I could fight for people, all right? So, I want to make sure everyone has access to health care. I don't want anyone to walk into a hospital and find out that their parents don't have health care. I don't want to see a young mother who's got a 6-month-old child sick, doesn't know what to do, but can't call a doctor or someone with health care. I don't want to see somebody foreclosed on their house. I had a gentleman come up to me in Federal Way about a month ago who said, he was a veteran, he was being foreclosed on, couldn't get an answer, came to my office. I want to help that person because it is burnt into my soul what it looks like to have somebody who is poor and can't help themselves. I want to be their champion, and I have been their champion. In 22 years, I haven't always voted the right way. There's no question about that, all right? But I have always been a passionate advocate for the people of my district, and particularly for the ones who don't have the power. I'm not the 19-year-old kid in SeaTac anymore trying to help his widowed mother. I'm a member of Congress who's got the power to help people, and I damn well use it.
Anything to add?
I get passionate about anything. I've been told I have a lot of energy. I've been stopped by state senators and they're like, you have so much energy. But I mean, it's hard not to get passionate about these things because they're not separate issues. They're all part of the same underlying issue, which is we have been suppressing working people and we've been holding back the middle class in order to favor this billionaire class that we shoulder on our backs. With 70% of us create the wealth that only 30% get to enjoy, but we're the ones who do all the hard work and we don't get to benefit from it. We are all struggling, and it's hard not to get passionate about everything from healthcare to education to housing to war to military spending, the economy of violence that we have created that's killing people abroad. I don't want to watch one more person stand in front of a war memorial and weep for their friends that they lost. I don't want to watch one more veteran from this cycle of endless war go into the VA and struggle to get the care that they need. I want to make sure everybody has a dignified quality of life and that they have a representative that fights for them because they know that all aspects from education to war to suffering to houselessness to wanting food to wanting to be able to pay for utilities, all of those are linked together and they all matter. We are all struggling to make all those ends meet.
Next question.
Hi, I'm wondering mostly, there's the microphone. In your opinion, what would be the best way for the federal government to assist in the reduction, stopping, or possible even reversal of climate change?
A carbon tax and three things. Carbon tax, massive investment in new technologies. Part of that's green energy, part of it is also getting more out of the electricity that we generate. So much of it goes away, so much of it is wasted. We can come up with better products that use energy better. There's incredible technology on battery life. We have the money, the intelligence, the system right now to invent these products that can get us to a green energy future. But you gotta make carbon more expensive, and you've gotta make the alternatives and the ways to conserve energy better. And the last thing you gotta do, and this is why I'm such a big supporter of 1631, is you have to take some of that money from the carbon tax and help poor people. Because when we talk about a regressive tax system, increase in energy costs hit poor people harder than anything. That's something they gotta pay, keep the heat on. So part of what the carbon tax does is it takes that money and says, while we're transitioning, if there are costs that are going to go higher on your energy because of all the money we've invested in fossil fuels and all the systems for it, we're gonna help you. We're gonna give you some money to get us to that green energy future. Those are the three things we need to do. There's a bill in Congress, sponsored by Congressman John Larson, that does precisely that I'm a co-sponsor of, and I think that's the best plan. I voted for the cap and trade plan in 2009. I didn't think it was necessarily the best plan, but it too, you gotta put a cost on carbon. That's the bottom line.
I think there's a heck of a lot more that we could do. There's 3 major bills in the House that the congressman's not signed on that are geared at fighting climate change, and I understand the importance of a carbon tax. It is a necessary tax for us to have, but at the same time, there's a lot more we need to be doing. We need to be getting away from fossil fuels. We need to be pulling fuel subsidies. We need to put those into green energy so they can focus on research and development. We need to make sure that those same people who are living in poverty, we're at the 11th hour with climate change. They're gonna suffer all while we're waiting for Congressman Smith to sign on because there's no money set aside for them. Their life is going to get worse. We have to do something now, and we can continue to fight for that carbon tax and also sign on to those bills and fight for those 3 major bills. I think they're incredibly important. Getting away from fossil fuels is the only way we're going to be able to move forwards. That's why I'm actually a big supporter of a brand new Green Deal, and that includes infrastructure investment, things like new power grids, things like the solar batteries, like wind farms, like solar farms, like hydroelectric. These are all things that we've needed for years, but we've been stalling because we're beholden to fossil fuel companies. And I think part of the reason that one of the things corporate money is buying in this race is, I say it all the time, it's buying silence, it's not buying speech. And $10,000 and being the top recipient of PAC money over all the senators in the state of Washington, of course Congressman Smith is going to find excuses not to sign on to these bills. But we cannot wait anymore. Those people living in poverty cannot wait anymore.
I'm signed on to a carbon tax, okay? If you watch your television, there ain't no question that corporations don't like that. The reason I'm not signed on to those 3 bills is because they don't do anything for poor people. They don't put any money aside to help people make that transition.
They fight
That's
for
the
climate
reason
change.
I'm not signed on to those 3.
They fight for climate change, which poor people are going to be suffering from.
Right, well, if those poor people say, look, I can't keep the energy on in my house, you think they're going to support that? You think they're going to support members of Congress in the Midwest and elsewhere who vote for a bill that just drove them out of their house because they can't afford energy?
If they're flooded
If
out
those
from
3
rising sea
bills were
levels, their
going to
houses
do
are
what they
buried,
were
it's
going
not
to
an option.
do, they would set money aside to help people make that transition. So to say that it's because I'm bought off when I'm out there supporting a carbon tax, you've seen the ads on television. All those companies hate that. So it's just this notion that I'm bought off by corporations is a bald-faced lie, dishonest, and goes completely against my entire record as a member of Congress.
I think that those people, when their houses are flooded, are not really going to have a say in much. And I think that it's important that, I've mentioned before, a carbon tax is important, but it's not the be-all and end-all. We have to do more than just a carbon tax. There has to be more. And I want to have that money set aside for poor people, for people that are going to be struggling. And there is nothing stopping the congressman from sending a request to add that in there if they want his co-sponsor on it.
I sent a request to John Larson, who sponsored the right bill that I supported. You're right, there's nothing stopping me, and I did it.
All right, we're going to have time for a couple more questions before we wrap this up and get to the questions that the candidates have for each other. So if there are questions that the candidates want to submit, please do that either to Sharon or to me directly, and we'll take these 2 questions in the meantime. Go ahead. Oh, excuse me, go ahead.
All right, Congressman Smith, so one of your biggest donors is Blue Cross Blue Shield. Another one of your biggest donors is Boeing. So when you say that you are going to support Medicare for all and cutting the military budget, how can we trust you when you keep taking corporate money from people who are not going to support that? And why would they give to you if you're going to support it?
Well, because I've done it, first of all. And also, when we say one of your biggest donors, PAC money is limited. The corporate money that is truly killing our democracy right now is independent expenditures that are unlimited, all right? I've got about 1,000 biggest donors because the most they can give me is $5,000 in a primary, okay? And like I said, with Boeing, I voted against B-2. They were a big part of that. I voted against the F-22. On the insurance companies, I voted for the healthcare bill. I voted for allowing us to have a better competitive drug market. I consistently voted against it. You ask the question, why do they keep giving me money? Because I'm kind of good at my job. I listen to people, okay? And when it comes to the Armed Services Committee, as much as I disagree with Boeing, I get into fights with them all the time, I listen to them. And I listen to the legislation. Everything that, I do not believe that corporations are evil. And I know there's people in here who disagree with me on that. I don't believe it. I think in some cases they can be helpful, in some cases not. And by the way, sometimes they don't give me money. The B-2 vote, Northrop Grumman now does give me money. For 12 years, they didn't. AT&T, when I took my vote on net neutrality, they didn't give me money for like 8 years. So I don't care, all right? If at the end of the day, it's legal within the system, I'll accept the contribution, but I'm gonna vote my district, and the record shows that. And again, we gotta get at Citizens United. We gotta get at this thing that allowed unlimited money to flood in, independent of anything you can give to us as members of Congress. I mean, $5,000, $10,000 compared to the $35 million that Sheldon Adelson was able to drop into the middle of races, unregulated, in many cases untransparent. That's the money that does it. But again, look at my record and look at my votes. And guys, keep trying to say, well, you took this vote. No, I didn't, all right? I vote my district, I vote my constituents, I follow the campaign finance laws, and I raise money from people who are legally able to give it within the limits that they're legally able to give. And my record shows that you can absolutely trust me on that.
So I'm gonna get a little grassroots in my phrasing, but I think if you put makeup on a pig, it's still a pig. Corporate money is still corporate money, and 93% of Americans, and this is not Democrats or Republicans, this is 93% of Americans believe in the corrupting influence of corporate money in our system, and perception is reality for people. And the best way to earn trust from people is to just not take the money. And so I guess I'm gonna ask a question back of the congressman. If it doesn't matter and it doesn't affect your vote, then why take it?
Because I have to run a campaign, and you have to run a campaign. We raise money for campaigns. Now, the system that I would prefer, and we've talked about this, is one that they had in Arizona, which was full public finance. That would be the best system. I support that, and co-sponsored the bill to do that. And if they passed that so that we didn't have to raise money, absolutely, that would be great. But as long as you have to raise money, and the thing is, we've got all these people saying they don't take corporate money. Corporate money was outlawed, okay? You are only allowed to take it from PACs. What are PACs? It's money that they raise from their employees, okay? And by the way, I agree with you. You should not hold employees accountable, and I apologize for that. I think you did do the right thing and did do a good job. But employees get money. So you've got all these people saying, I don't take corporate PAC money. But then they take max out donations from lobbyists and corporate executives. And these are the same people who give to the corporation who then give the PAC money. That's just a dishonest shell game. I follow the law, all right? The law on where you can raise your money from. And I'll tell you something else again, this notion that, well, if you raise money from individuals from, all across the country, that somehow makes you less beholden. You don't think that national organizations like a brand new Congress have an agenda? What happens if you disagree with a brand new Congress and they're responsible for all these donations that we're given? That's what I think you will do, and I believe this. You'll vote against them, and you will vote for your district. I believe that. I think I know you well enough to know that you will do that. But wherever you get your money from, those people who are giving you that money are going to expect something. And if you don't deliver it, they're likely to pull it. So you have to be willing to take the vote and have the money be pulled, and I have.
All right, next question.
Puget Sound Energy is building a tank of enormous volume in the tide flats of Tacoma, a potential environmental disaster waiting to happen. And I understand, Congressman Smith, you've accepted more money from PSE than any other politician in Washington State.
That's not true, but that's okay. Well, here's the interesting thing about that. First of all,
I have another
question.
So having said those two things, what is your position on liquid natural gas?
Well, here's what I did, actually. First of all, PSE is a PAC, like everything else. The most they can give is $10,000, okay? I am not the only politician in this state or in America that PSE has given $10,000 to.
Oh, I didn't say that, though.
Well, you said I was the largest recipient
in Washington State.
Yeah, and I'm saying that there are a whole lot of other people in Washington State who have gotten $10,000 from PSE. Well, I guess technically you're right. If they got the same amount that I did, then I am the largest. It's a bit misleading, but it is technically accurate. But here's what I did. I went down to Northeast Tacoma, and I met with the people in the neighborhood that I lived in for 13 years, as a matter of fact, who were concerned about that. And I lobbied to get a second environmental impact statement, which they weren't going to do, which the city of Tacoma wasn't going to do, and Pierce County weren't going to do. I called on them to get that second thing. Despite this, and again, I agree with PSE on a lot of things they do. I don't agree with them on this. So I got that second EIS. What that second EIS said, which is really interesting, is that the whole point of trying to do liquid natural gas was because normally they use diesel coming in and out, and that was bad for the environment, bad for what was going on. What they found out though is it depends on where the liquid natural gas comes from. If it comes from Canada, it's actually cleaner burning and better for the environment than diesel.
I disagree, I will just say that. I think it's all dirty if it's.
Well, diesel isn't exactly clean either. I know.
We want to make sure we do these
but the point is, despite that money, PSE didn't want that second environmental impact statement. My constituents did. I asked for it.
So your position on liquid natural gas is that you don't support the use of liquid natural gas, particularly if it's fracked. Fracked is terrible.
Yeah, but that's the point. That's why I'm sorry, but she keeps doing this, and I gotta answer the question. It's just what I do.
Well, I think we have the answer. I do want to see if Candidate Smith
the point
has
is,
any
if
other
it's not
questions,
fracked,
any
that's
comments.
exactly the issue. That's why they said Canada is cheaper, but the United States Canada is less bad for the environment, but the United States is not. That's what we learned.
Candidate Smith.
So I believe that we've been sold a lot of stories about how fracking is good for the environment and everything like that, but over time we've seen that it's not. We have release of methane into the air, there's cancer-causing chemicals that go into the process. I'm not a supporter of the liquid natural gas plant or pipeline, and I actually think we've been sold a long-term lie when it comes to the fossil fuel industry. Every job that fossil fuel generates, green energy generates for. So when people tell you that it's a jobs thing and that's why we need to have it here, it's just not true. It's just a lie. And it's important to realize that we need to make that transition away from those fossil fuels and away from liquid natural gas. We need to make sure that we're moving towards green energy because that's where the jobs are and that's where the work is. And so if we really wanted to create meaningful work for people, we'd be focusing all in on creating as many green jobs as we could for folks.
And I 100% agree with that. But nobody in the climate change movement says, we are not going to be able to get off fossil fuels in a year, or 5, or 10 years from now. So if we're going to have to use fossil fuels, part of the uncomfortable discussion is, what's the best ones to use? Obviously, at the top of the list, get off of it as fast as you can. But nobody says we're going to be able to get off of it like that. So you do have to make some of these more difficult choices.
But I believe you have to start somewhere, and that's what some of those three, that's actually all three of those bills in the house, that are in the House right now, are getting us off of fossil fuels. And we can't just do nothing and be paralyzed because it's gonna take a long time. We have to start doing it now. And that's why I keep going back to those 3 bills, because that's what those 3 major bills are. The OFF Act, the Keep It in the Ground Act, and the 100 by 50 Act.
All right, well, we're gonna have to cut off audience questions now. We've run out of time. Hopefully, you can contact the campaigns directly. They'll be able to give you an answer to the questions that you have. Thank you, everybody, for asking the questions, and hopefully they were informative. We do want to remind people that we are having a ballot party, going over each issue on the local ballot on November 2nd. We're gonna try and make everything accessible for everyone. Everyone opens their ballot a lot of times and is going, who is this judge and what is this initiative and what does this all mean? We're going to be covering that on the November 2nd show of the 5th State. So now we've come to the conclusion of the program, and we'll give each candidate 3 minutes to close. And Congressman Smith, you're going first.
Sure. Well, I just want to say thank you for the questions and for the robust debate. And I guess we'll close with the fact that I think experience does matter. And I have been through a lot of very tough questions. Not the first person to shout at me. So it's the nature of the job, it's the nature of public policy. And I think that matters, to know how to handle a difficult audience, to know how to handle difficult questions, to be thoughtful in your approach. And at the end of the day, that's what I am, as you can tell, a very passionate progressive. I got into politics for exactly the reason I said I did. I wanted to help people, and in part because I couldn't help my family when they needed that help. Now I was going to be able to help other people. And I'm determined and hardworking. I got elected to the state senate when I was 25, Congress when I was 31, ranking member on the Armed Services Committee when I was 45, youngest, I think Les Aspin actually was younger. But, so I work very, very hard for the people I represent because it is born into me. And I think if you have a representative like that, Sarah's right, we need people who are going to stand up for the people, stand up for working class people, stand up for struggling people. I've done that. I've voted against corporate tax cuts. I've voted to expand healthcare. I've taken the votes. When you have someone who has worked hard and accomplished as much as I have and done as much for the people of the district, There are other people in Congress. I mean, I think the cap and trade issue, and well, when Democrats were in charge of Congress, how come they didn't address it? I did. I voted for it. I co-sponsored the bills. You know, if you got a beef with the Senate and other people, take it there. You have a committed, passionate progressive representing this district with the experience, knowledge, and history in this district to be incredibly effective as I have been. I don't think you should turn that out, because I think it's going to help the people of this district. So I appreciate the debate, I appreciate the robust discussion, and I do think that there's nothing wrong with having a thoughtful approach to this. As you can tell, I'm perfectly capable of getting angry on behalf of people who I think deserve a fair shake and deserve help. But the other thing I bring to the table is a deep background on the issues, a deep thoughtfulness, and a deep knowledge of the legislative process that's going to help me be able, I think, better able to get things done on all those issues that we've talked about today. And I thank you for the opportunity to have been here this evening.
So of course, thank you for hosting the forum, and thank you for giving us the space to have this debate. I know it's, I think, the 9th one we've done together.
I lost track.
I lost track too, and we're still not done. But I'm a 30-year-old working class woman that knows what it's like to lose your house, that knows what it's like to sleep on couches for almost a year, that knows what it's like to struggle under thousands of dollars of student debt. I've grown up as part of our post-recession America generation. I've grown up knowing what those struggles are and knowing what those struggles look like. And I've grown up knowing how important it is to have that lens of somebody who has lived through it to look at legislation. Because there are going to be moments where legislators say, oh, we can sacrifice this part, we can get rid of that part, we can let go of this part. But we as working people know exactly how that's going to end up for us because we've lived on the other end of those compromises. And we are tired of being the recipients of negative lifestyles because of compromise. We are tired of watching our neighbors suffer. We are tired of watching ourselves go into foreclosure. We are tired of not being able to participate in the economy that we build up on our backs. We are not able to start families. We're not able to buy homes. We're not able to go get educated. And it's going to be worse for the generation that comes after us. This is an opportunity for us to take bold, powerful stances and bold, powerful action for the things that matter to us the most. This is an opportunity for us to use this seat as a pulpit to fight for progressive values nationwide, to fight for things like single-payer healthcare, like debt-free education, like an investment in infrastructure, and a brand new Green Deal. We just need to have representation that's brave enough to stand up and do it. I want to stand up and I want to fight for this district. I want to fight for this district, and I want to fight as this district in Congress, making sure that everybody coast to coast gets to experience the amazing life that we can build for ourselves together when we have progressive representation. But this is what this is all about. Right now, we're in an era where to be visionary is to be pragmatic. To have a plan is to be a bold, unapologetic progressive. Where to have lived something is to have the experience to govern something. We have an opportunity to change the way that our government is run. We can make it so it's run for us and not for corporations, not for the billionaire class, but for the people that matter, for the working people, for the middle class people, and for the people who are living in poverty. We can lift them up and bring them with us, and we can have a bold new America. I believe in bold vision because bold vision empowers us at the bottom to be just as strong and powerful at the top. We just need to take the risk and make it happen for us here in the night.
Thank you very much, both candidates, for answering these questions, for being here and accountable for the people. Thank you everyone here for attending. Just a reminder, we're going to be rebroadcasting this forum on KVRU 105.7 FM on Friday at 6, Saturday at 11, and Sunday at 1. We've also done a number of shows on the initiatives and items on the ballot to date, which will also be running on KVRU and also on the 5th Estate on Fridays at 5. So thank you so much for attending. Have a wonderful evening.